Did the first video game you ever played look something like this? Or how about this? Now, maybe something in between. It is obvious that the look and play of video games has skyrocketed since the early days of Pong. Still, many people just take that history, that evolution, if you will, for granted. And that is something that this topic will change. So, let's take a journey back through 8. Yes, 8 generations of home gaming consoles and watch them progress from huge squares flying across a blank screen to the modern marvels of technology, art, and design. Our tour begins in the 1970s, where disco was made slightly more tolerable by the invention of Pong. Pong was the featured game on the Odyssey home console system released in 1974. This is the real beginning of what would soon become a billion-dollar industry. The Odyssey console boasted black and white graphics and minimal gameplay, and people loved it. Pong was a huge success, and within a couple years, competitors took notice and an industry was born, and then nearly died. By 1977, there were so many companies creating Pong imitations that the market was heading for a crash. This, to many, was the first console war, and it would not be the last. Although not the only console in this era, the Atari 2600 stands out as the most popular and successful. Released in 1977, this home gaming system introduced exchangeable ROM, read-only memory cartridges, and allowed a nearly limitless number of game titles that one could play on the system. By today's standards, the graphics were comical, and games blinked uncontrollably when more than 2 moving figures occupied the screen. But the Atari 2600 games were undeniably fun to play and were wildly popular. The system came with a joystick and even a wheel controller for racing games, which was just amazing at the time. Note, this is also the era in which arcades started popping up all over the country in pizza parlors and shopping malls. Video games are now part of American pop culture, with games like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong were national obsessions. Well, for a short time anyway. By the end of the second generation of game consoles in 1983, the arcade sensation ended in a sudden crash. Arcades all but disappeared, and the great but short-lived time of the arcade was over. Home console gaming, however, was just getting started. Needing to evolve if they were going to survive the arcade crash, Nintendo, makers of the arcade hit Donkey Kong, entered into the console market. In 1985, they introduced the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, and it was an instant and massive success in both America and Japan. The NES displayed huge improvements over the Atari 2600. 8-bit graphics, and a newly designed multi-button controller with a D-pad were introduced. The system also came with a light sensor gun and even a robot called Rob, of all things. Of course, what really made this system popular were the games. This is the era that gave us Mario Brothers and Zelda, and for many gamers, this is when they fell in love with video games. Now, towards the end of the third generation, arcades did have a brief resurgence because of popular brawler and fighting games like Street Fighter that couldn't be duplicated on the Nintendo Entertainment System or other third generation consoles, and this resurgence lasted until about the mid-1990s. The fourth generation is heralded by the Sega Genesis system being released to the American public in 1989. This system hoped to dethrone the NES with 16-bit graphics, full-color spectrums, advanced music and stereo sound, and a massive library of games. Sega hoped the Genesis system was a death knell for the NES, and it was. Unfortunately for Sega, Nintendo released the Super NES in 1990 with the same capabilities of the Genesis, and Nintendo managed to remain the king of the consoles. The fifth generation begins with entertainment giant Sony entering into the console landscape. In 1994, Sony introduces the Sony PlayStation. This console uses CD-ROMs instead of cartridges and introduces 3D games to the home market. 32-bit graphics are now the standard, and games like Tomb Raider are starting to look more like real life than cartoons. This is a significant jump in technology, and the PlayStation becomes the dominant console in the market for a number of years. In fact, the PlayStation is such a hit for Sony that even Nintendo's latest, Nintendo 64, and the Sega Saturn are just competing for second place. For many, this era, the sixth generation of console gaming, is when home gaming systems truly went mainstream and boomed the industry to where it is today. It is also the start of what will be a long and brutal console war between three giants. Leading the pack is the PlayStation 2, released in 2000. The PlayStation 2 became the most popular gaming console in history and still holds many records in terms of popularity and financial sales. Now, not to be left behind, Nintendo also introduces the Nintendo GameCube to the market. Finally, a video game newcomer, though certainly not a minor competitor, called Microsoft makes a play for the market with the Xbox. These consoles are now boasting near picture-perfect graphics and PC-like processors, allowing games to greatly advance in terms of graphics and capability. Consoles are now starting to integrate with a rapidly expanding new technology called the World Wide Web. The spark of online gaming and downloadable games has ignited something huge to come. Technology advances rapidly now. Last generation's consoles are barely 5 years old when new capabilities are ready for the market. Each of the three big console makers released new machines. Microsoft brings out the Xbox 360 in 2005, Sony launches the PlayStation 3 in 2006, and Nintendo follows that with the Nintendo Wii also in 2006. Consoles are more popular than ever, and the huge demand turns game development studios into multi-million-dollar success stories. This is the golden era of companies like Blizzard, Bungie, Valve, and many more. The industry as a whole is now making billions. Big title game releases now are actually competing and often beating Hollywood summer blockbuster movies in terms of dollars earned. As for the games, not only are sound and graphics improving, but consoles now fully embrace the internet. Games are downloadable and open new profit models such as additional downloadable content and offering smaller games with more friendly pricing. For many students, this is the gaming era you grew up in, so you know, it was awesome. And here we are today, in the 8th generation of video game consoles. Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft are still at the top, although each has released a new generation of their consoles. They have better graphics and gameplay than ever, as well as near photorealistic images. Video game cutscenes look like massive Hollywood productions, and yet there are new competitors for console gamer dollars. PC games have had a resurgence in popularity, in part because of Valve's online gaming service, Steam, and in part because consoles still can't match PC graphics and versatility. Mobile smart devices such as phones and tablets have also created new markets that compete with console game sales. Now, as we look and try to predict the 9th generation of home consoles, we can see with new technology and a new generation of game makers, a very bright and exciting future. Internet gaming is seen by many as the future. Streaming content allows people to play games from their PCs that overmatch even the newest consoles in terms of visuals and content flexibility. In addition, smartphone and tablet gaming has hit critical mass and has found a mainstream audience unimagined by the old school giants. New online streaming services like Steam from Valve are becoming hugely popular as new gaming platform choices. Hosted gaming has also proven popular among untraditional video game fans through social media sites like Facebook. This is where we are today. It is a great time to be a gamer.